Ever think about historical archives? You know those rooms full of dusty old documents?
Yeah, I can picture it now. Quiet, dim lighting.
Exactly. But what if we could make all that history way more accessible? That's what they're doing at Virginia Tech University libraries, using AI and their digital library platform.
It's a pretty cool project. The paper we're looking at today focuses on how they're using AI to make these archives more searchable and understandable.
And they're working with three very different types of collections, too. Handwritten Civil War letters,
Oh, wow.
old newspapers from the Montgomery Museum,
Okay.
and even digitized topographic maps.
Oh, that's a variety.
And what's really cool is that they're not just scanning these documents, they're using some seriously advanced AI to make them truly searchable and understandable, which has huge implications for how we learn about history. For example, take those handwritten Civil War letters. They're often fragile, the ink is faded, and the handwriting can be, well, let's just say a bit challenging to decipher.
I can imagine. I've seen some of those old letters.
Right. So how does traditional optical character recognition or OCR software handle that kind of challenge?
Well, OCR works best with neat typed text. But for most of human history, everything was handwritten, and often in cursive styles that are pretty much lost arts today.
That makes sense. So how do you even begin to teach a computer to read something that even humans struggle with?
That's the really cool part. Virginia Tech has developed custom AI agents, specifically designed for handwriting recognition. Imagine a digital historian who has studied thousands upon thousands of handwritten documents and can now decipher even the most challenging scrawl.
Wow, that's amazing. So it's like these AI agents are translating the past for us. But what about really lengthy, complex documents, say a whole stack of historical newspapers?
That's where large language models, or LLMs, come in. LLMs are a type of AI that's been trained on massive amounts of text data. It's like giving a computer a crash course in language and then setting it loose to analyze and understand complex texts.
So they're kind of like super-powered interns, reading through mountains of documents and pulling out the most important points.
Exactly. And they can do it with incredible speed and accuracy. They can summarize those lengthy texts, translate them into modern English, even answer specific questions about the content.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a little. So we've got AI agents tackling handwriting and LLMs helping us digest huge amounts of text.
Yeah.
But the paper also mentions that the digital library platform is cloud-based, right? What's the significance of that?
Oh, that's key, because it means this platform can handle massive collections.
Yeah.
Truly massive. We're talking terabytes of data, which is like,
Hold on, terabytes. Can you put that into perspective? Like, how many books are we talking about?
well, imagine a library that's bigger than any physical library you've ever seen, filled with millions upon millions of documents. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. And because it's cloud-based, it's accessible from anywhere in the world.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just about deciphering these documents. It's about making them available to anyone who wants to learn. So let's dive into the specific collections that the paper focuses on, starting with those Civil War letters. I have to admit, I'm really drawn to that idea of getting a personal glimpse into such a pivotal moment in history.
Yes, the Silas Stepp collection at Virginia Tech is a great example of how this technology can bring history to life. The AI not only transcribes the letters, but also helps us understand them. It can correct errors, decipher that old-timey language, and even generate summaries in modern English. Imagine reading a letter from a soldier on the front lines, and it's as clear and understandable as an email you receive today. That's what this technology makes possible.
That's incredible. It really does bridge the gap between the past and present. And the paper even highlights a specific example, right?
Yes, Figure 4 in the paper shows how the AI corrected a word in one of Stepp's letters, and then provided a concise summary of the letter's content.
Okay, but I think what's really fascinating here is what this technology means for historians, right? Suddenly, they have access to this whole new level of detail and insight.
Absolutely. It's like giving them a magnifying glass for the past. And not just for historians. Imagine genealogists tracing their family history, or students learning about a specific historical period. These letters become so much more than just faded ink on paper. They become stories, voices, and connections to the past.
All right, so we've seen how AI can bring those personal stories to life. But what about something like a newspaper, which has a much more complex structure?
Right. Newspapers present a whole new set of challenges for digitization. You've got columns, advertisements, images all jumbled together. It's a layout nightmare for traditional OCR.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tough. So how does the AI even begin to make sense of all that?
Well, that's where layout analysis comes in. Essentially, they're using AI to teach the computer to see the newspaper the way a human would. The AI can identify different elements on the page, figure out the reading order, and then extract the text accordingly.
So it's like the AI is learning to read the newspaper like we do, scanning the headlines, skipping over the ads, and following the flow of the text.
Exactly. And the paper provides a great visual representation of this process in Figure 2. It shows how the AI analyzes the layout of a newspaper page, breaking it down into its different components.
Okay, this is really cool. So we've got AI that can read handwriting, summarize text, analyze complex layouts. It's like a Swiss Army knife for historical research. But I'm curious, how does this technology actually work in practice? Like if I wanted to search for something specific in these digitized collections, how would that even work?
That's where things get really interesting. Imagine you're interested in learning about, say, the impact of the Civil War on a particular town. You go to the digital library platform, type in the town's name, and the AI would scan through all those digitized documents, letters, newspapers, maps, and pull up any mentions of that town.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like having a personal research assistant who can sift through mountains of data in seconds. But it's not just about finding specific information, right? This technology also allows us to make connections and see patterns that we might have missed before.
You got it. For example, you could search for all the letters that mention a certain battle, then use the AI to analyze the language and sentiment in those letters. That could give you a whole new perspective on how people experienced that battle.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've seen how AI is being used to transcribe, translate, summarize, and analyze historical documents. But I have to ask, where does this all go from here? What's the next frontier in this field?
Well, one of the most exciting areas of research is in something called AI-powered metadata generation. Imagine if the AI could automatically tag and categorize documents, making them even easier to search and analyze.
Okay, that sounds incredible. So instead of just searching for keywords, you could actually search by themes, concepts, or even emotions expressed in the documents.
Exactly. And that would open up a whole new world of possibilities for historical research.
Yeah.
It would allow us to see connections and patterns that we might never have discovered before.
This is really mind-blowing stuff. It feels like we're on the verge of a revolution in how we understand and interact with the past.
We are. And it's not just about technology. It's about the potential to democratize knowledge, making historical resources available to everyone, not just academics.
That's a really powerful vision. So we've got AI agents deciphering handwriting, LLMs summarizing complex texts, layout analysis, making sense of jumbled pages, and the possibility of AI-powered metadata taking things to a whole new level. This is seriously impressive stuff. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the human side of this story. Because at the end of the day, this technology is all about people, right?
Absolutely. It's about the people who created these documents, the people who are working to preserve them, and the people who are using this technology to learn from them. And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. You know, it's fascinating when you think about it, these historical documents. Someone sat down, pen and ink, painstakingly put their thoughts onto paper. And now, centuries later, we're using cutting-edge AI to decipher those thoughts, bringing them back to life.
It really is amazing, like building a bridge between generations, using technology to connect with the past in a way that wouldn't have been possible even a few years ago. But I'm curious about the people working on this project. Are they all tech wizards? Or are there historians involved too?
It's a really interdisciplinary effort. You've got computer scientists developing the AI algorithms, librarians and archivists understanding those nuances of these historical collections, and historians providing context and interpretation. It's a real team effort. Makes sense. It's like a historical research dream team, each person bringing their expertise to the table. So let's talk about how this technology is changing the way we do historical research. We touched on this earlier, but I'd love to dig a bit deeper.
Sure. One of the biggest impacts is in the area of distant reading. Traditionally, historians have relied on close reading, carefully analyzing individual documents, looking for their meaning and significance.
Right. I remember spending hours poring over old letters and diaries in college, trying to decipher the handwriting and piece together the story. It was fascinating, but also incredibly time-consuming.
Exactly. And that's where distant reading comes in. With AI, historians can analyze huge amounts of text, looking for patterns, trends, and connections that you'd never spot through close reading alone.
So it's like zooming out to get a bird's-eye view of history, seeing the forest instead of just the trees.
Yes. And that allows historians to ask new questions. Explore new avenues of inquiry. For example, they might analyze thousands of letters from a particular time period. See how language and sentiment change during a war or a social movement, or they might track the spread of ideas or the evolution of cultural norms over time.
Wow, that's incredible. Like having a time machine for historical research. You know, one of the things that struck me about those Civil War letters was the idea of getting a glimpse into the everyday lives of people from the past. I'm wondering if this technology can be used to explore other aspects of social history, too.
Absolutely. One area where it's already having a big impact is in the study of underrepresented groups. Historically, the voices and experiences of marginalized communities weren't always preserved in traditional archives.
Right, because often it's the stories of the powerful and elite that get recorded.
Exactly. But with AI, we can now digitize and analyze a much wider range of sources, like personal letters, diaries, oral histories, even social media posts.
So it's like we're expanding the historical record, giving the voice to those who might have been silenced in the past.
That's the idea. And it's leading to some really exciting new insights into the lives and experiences of everyday people. For example, researchers are using this technology to study the history of immigration, the women's suffrage movement, the LGBTQ plus rights movement.
That's amazing. It really shows how this technology can help us to rewrite history, to tell a more inclusive and nuanced story of the past. But I'm also curious about the limitations of this technology. Are there things that AI just can't do?
Of course, AI is a tool, and like any tool, it has its strengths and limitations. One of the key challenges is that AI algorithms can be biased, reflecting the biases that exist in the data they're trained on.
Right, because if the historical record itself is biased, then the AI will just continue those biases.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to be aware of that potential for bias, to use these tools critically and thoughtfully. We can't just blindly trust the output of an AI algorithm. We need to always be asking questions, checking sources, and considering different perspectives.
So it's really about using AI as a tool to enhance human understanding, not to replace it.
Precisely. And that's why collaboration is so crucial between technologists, historians, and other experts in the field.
Makes perfect sense. You know, one thing I'm really excited about is the potential of this technology to make history more accessible and engaging for the general public. We talked about how it can democratize knowledge, but how do we actually make that happen? How do we get people excited about exploring historical archives?
That's a great question. I think there's a huge opportunity here to use AI to create more interactive and immersive experiences. Imagine virtual reality tours of historical sites or interactive timelines that bring historical events to life.
Oh, those are really cool ideas. It's like stepping into a time machine and experiencing history firsthand.
Exactly. And we can also use AI to personalize the learning experience. Imagine a museum exhibit where you can scan a QR code and the AI curates a personalized tour based on your interests.
That would be incredible, like having a personal tour guide who knows exactly what you want to see. But beyond museums, I'm also thinking about classrooms. Could AI help to make history more engaging and relevant for students?
Absolutely. Imagine a history textbook that comes alive with interactive maps, 3D models, and personalized learning activities. Or imagine students being able to use AI to analyze historical documents and draw their own conclusions.
That's so much more engaging than just reading a dry textbook or listening to a lecture.
Right, and it allows students to become active participants in the learning process, which is so much more effective than passive learning.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the exciting possibilities of this technology, but I'm also curious about the challenges. What are some of the roadblocks that we need to overcome to make this vision a reality?
Well, one of the biggest is simply the sheer scale of the task. There are millions upon millions of historical documents out there, waiting to be digitized and analyzed. It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, that's a lot of data. And then there's the funding issue. These projects require significant investment in technology, infrastructure, and expertise.
Absolutely. And then there are the ethical considerations we talked about, ensuring that we're using these tools responsibly and mitigating potential biases. It's a complex landscape, but I'm optimistic that we can overcome these challenges.
Me too. You know what? I think the key to success lies in collaboration. We need historians, technologists, educators, and policymakers all working together to make sure this technology is used to benefit society as a whole.
I couldn't agree more. This is not just about technology. It's about using technology to empower people, to connect us to the past, and to help us build a better future.
Well said. This has been an incredibly thought-provoking conversation. We've covered so much ground, from the technical details of AI to the broader societal implications of this work. And I have to say, I'm feeling very optimistic about the future of historical research.
Me too. It's an exciting time to be working in this field.
Yeah.
I think we're just at the beginning of what's possible.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear your thoughts on something. We've talked about making history more accessible to the public, but what about making it more relevant? How do we bridge that gap between the past and the present? Show people why history actually matters.
That's a fantastic question. And it's one that we'll explore in our final segment. Because ultimately, history is not just about the past. It's about understanding who we are, where we come from, and where we're going as a society.
You know, it's funny, we always think of history as this fixed, unchangeable thing. But learning about AI and its potential in historical research it makes me realize history is actually this living, breathing thing, constantly being reinterpreted and rewritten.
That's a great point. Every new discovery, every new perspective, it can change how we understand the past. And AI is giving us the tools to make those discoveries, explore those perspectives
Yeah.
in ways we never could before.
Exactly. Which brings us back to your question about making history relevant. Because if history is always evolving, then it's not just about memorizing dates and facts, right? It's about understanding how those events, those people, shaped the world we live in today.
Absolutely. AI can play a key role in making those connections clear. For example, imagine an interactive timeline. That shows how a historical event, like, say, the invention of the printing press, led to a chain reaction of other events, ultimately shaping our modern world.
Oh, that would be so cool. It really helps people see that history isn't just isolated events. It's this interconnected web of cause and effect that still influences us today.
Exactly. And by understanding those connections, we can get a much deeper appreciation for how complex the past is, the challenges we face in the present.
You know, one thing that really struck me when we were talking about those Civil War letters was the emotional impact they had. It wasn't just about the facts of the war. It was about the personal stories, the hopes and fears of the people who lived through it. And I'm wondering, can AI help us connect with that emotional side of history too?
That's a really interesting question. And I think the answer is yes. AI can analyze the language and sentiment in historical documents, giving us insights into the emotional lives of people from the past.
So instead of just knowing what happened, we could understand how people felt about it.
Exactly. And that could lead to a more empathetic understanding of history, seeing the human side of these events, the personal stories behind the headlines.
I love that. It's like taking a step back in time, feeling what it was like to actually live through those moments. I think that kind of emotional connection can be so powerful, especially for young people who might not otherwise be interested in history.
Definitely. If we can make history come alive, if we can help people connect with the past on that emotional level, then I think we can inspire a whole new generation of historians, history enthusiasts.
So we've talked a lot about how AI can change historical research, make history more accessible, engaging. But what about the downsides? Are there any risks that we need to be aware of?
Of course, any new technology has potential risks. One concern is that people might become too reliant on AI, accepting its output without question.
Right, like those AI-generated summaries we talked about, they're really helpful, but they're just a starting point. We still need to engage with the original sources, do our own critical thinking.
Absolutely. AI should be a tool to enhance human understanding, not to replace it. We need to use it thoughtfully,
Right.
critically, always be aware of its limitations.
That's an important point. And it brings up another concern, bias. We talked about this earlier, but it's worth repeating. AI algorithms are only as good as the data they're trained on. And if that data is biased, the AI will reflect those biases.
Exactly. That's why diversity and representation are so important. In the teams developing and using these technologies, we need to make sure these tools are being used to tell a more inclusive and accurate story of the past.
Well said. So it sounds like the key is to use AI responsibly, ethically, always keeping in mind its potential biases and limitations.
Absolutely. And to remember that AI is a tool for human progress. It's up to us to use it wisely, make sure it benefits society as a whole.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've explored so many different sides of this topic, from the technical nuts and bolts of AI to these philosophical questions about what history even is. I'm leaving this conversation feeling really optimistic about the future.
Me too. It's a really exciting time to be alive, to see this convergence of technology and history. I can't wait to see what new discoveries are out there, the new insights that are waiting for us.
Well, on that note, thanks for listening to this deep dive. It's been great having you along for the ride. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the past alive.